Hey, everybody. Let's talk about another action step, and this is influencing the media. Again, we're getting all of these narratives and things that are leading to a more reactive environment. And the truth is, it's not helpful. When we hear narratives that increase fear and increase anger and increase blaming, that is something that makes violence more likely. And we're looking to make violence less likely. So, how do we do this? One of the ways that we can interrupt these kinds of patterns and have a less reactive environment is if we can influence the media to stop trying to scare us. They do it because their ratings go up and they can sell more ad dollars as long as people are watching. And that's an understandable motivation, but it's incredibly irresponsible. So, when we hear rhetoric coming from the media that will lead to election violence, and again, this is the kind of blame-based rhetoric. It's when people are talking in a way that says, here's who you should be afraid of. Here's who you should be angry with. Here's who you should blame for this problem that you have. When that's what we're hearing from media sources, regardless of where in the political spectrum that media source might come from, that's a moment when we can respond and say, hey, listen, I don't appreciate the fact that this is how you are talking. It makes me turn off my television when I hear it. The other thing we can do is actually advocate with media. So when you hear especially a media organization that does a report on election violence, one of the things that you can do is write back, respond to that story, that newspaper article, that video clip, whatever it was that you saw, and say, hey, I know that you want to talk about election violence, and I actually agree that it's an incredibly important thing to talk about. But if you don't talk about it in a specific way, you're making it more likely rather than less likely. So when you are doing a story about the possibility of election violence or about election violence that is already happening, what we need you to do is also include the perspective of people who are not interested in violence, who do not want violence. Because one of those fundamental misunderstandings that we have in our country is 98, 99% of people don't want violence to happen, but a lot of them are worried that the other side of the political spectrum does. So when we hear these reports about election violence, people on both sides get scared and they say, hey, it must be the case that I'm right, and these mysterious people that I don't know are going to start this violence. So we need to also hear perspectives from the people who do not want it, people on various sides of the political spectrum. And then give us at least a little bit of information about how we can prevent violence. You don't have to cover the whole thing. It's a complicated topic. We understand this. But listen, media, if you're going to talk about election violence at all, please include at least one point about how we can prevent it. Here's a list. We can get to know people we don't already know. We can build resilient communities. We can communicate with our local security sector and talk about violence de-escalation. We can start a peace messaging campaign. We can help people know how to vote. We can do civic education and training in civil disobedience. We can talk with our politicians and candidates and ask them to change the way that they are discussing politics. We can move toward better elections, elections that are secure and fair and accessible and that feel fair to all of us. So these are some of the things we might be able to do. Please include at least one of these suggestions if you're going to do a story on election violence. Because again, if the media is running a story that is just frightening us, they are actually making election violence more likely. That's not a report that has neutral effect. When you just say the facts, you are scaring people. You need to include the additional information. Yes, it's true that X or Y happened, but also we need to ask you to talk about how to prevent it and the fact that most people would like to prevent it. Those are incredibly important things. Next time we talk, we'll have yet another action step.